Well, good evening, everyone. Different angle, different time of day, different type of topics. So there was something that at Adam Foster Music brought up that I caught on Twitter, which I thought was pretty interesting. He says the next culture war will take place on city councils and zoning boards over architecture, urban planning, housing, and public spaces. Will we surround ourselves with beauty and clean spaces or live in dystopian squalor? And he CC'd some prominent people, Michael Knowles, Douglas Murray, and the big issue. They tweeted this thing about all these benches there. You know, this idea of public space where you get the image of something nice, but then it's not actually pleasant. Yeah, we're already seeing this. I thought this was an interesting thing to reply to, considering my line of work here. Really key to all of this is, as the name Living Process, we named this company for a reason. It's not just the decisions that are made, it is the way things are done, the way the decisions are arrived at. That is really, really important. I think I've touched on this elsewhere in this channel, and I won't get into the details of it just now, but coming from the background that I do, being very familiar with Christopher Alexander's work, having had the great honor and privilege to meet him, to work with him for a brief time, setting up the school in Italy, and then once that was set up, I set up a different type of school in the similar area. And the big problem that industrialism has had, and I'll summarize this, is that you plan, execute. That's industrial process. Post-industrial process, craft process, is you got it right in front of you. And you make it and you test it and you know, and there's tradition informing you, and you want it to be a little bit smaller, you make it a little smaller, a little bigger, a little bigger. When it's industrial, there's the difference between, again, this is the Cartesian dualism split. There's the difference between what's in your head, res cogitans, and the difference between with what's in the world, res extensa. There's always a gap. What does everyone say? Oh, it doesn't look like it did in the pictures. Of course, because they're completely different things. And I've found with the work that we do with our clients, we do on-site work as much as we can. We do full-scale mock-ups as much as we can. And there are great people around in the Twitterverse that I interact with who do full-scale mock-ups like this. There are people who employ this to varying degrees, this method. Now, what's getting in our way of building great things? Well, cost is always a problem for everybody. Everybody would like it to be better. Why Tim Pool has been going on about, or one of Tim Pool's guests, like why did we, he was very interesting, he was talking about why do we have this ornate, wonderful Capitol in DC and now we don't do anything? Well, something Chris mentioned in the nature of order, it used to be that labor was cheap and materials were expensive. Now, materials are cheap and labor is expensive. And that is one of the underlying driving forces behind, getting everything flat and smooth, and you're just going to optimize the factoriness as much as possible. That computer technology changes this. Really changes this. Some of the stuff that I've been working on lately is really getting there. What we need is the goal of custom automated manufacturing. When you can do that, Frank Lloyd Wright himself, he was always way too ahead of his time. Making cantilevers that were too big before pre-tensioned concrete was a thing in falling water. But there was an essay that he wrote in a book called The Future on Architecture about the machine, and that he said that the artist should take the machine, and he also included the architect in that. That's another argument. The artist should take the machine in his hand to undo the deadly mischief which it hath wrought. That to use mechanical things beautifully, to find out how to do that, that's not easy. He wasn't really able to do that in the industrial era. He had to, well, he came close. The textile blocks and the custom molded stuff came close. But it got very expensive. Now, with, to a certain extent, 3D printing of molds. I don't know what I think about 3D printing of houses. I'm skeptical. 3D printing of molds, but also factory production of framing, factory production of trusses. It's possible that you get I think factory production of the entire house, probably going a bit too far. It's like self-driving cars. It might just be too much to make it worth it, but you get a lot of savings even when you do. And I've been dealing with this with clients lately. We're going into permitting. Most of the budget is in the framing of the walls, of your materials and your labor with the way that it's done. You simplify that by doing custom prefab. Not prefab where everything is the same. No. Because now you can reprogram the computers in a way that you couldn't in the past. It's not exactly there yet. There's still a profitability threshold of a high number of identical orders. If you can get the resilience and the flexibility, the granularity of the manufacturing down to where you can profitably plug something in, and this is going to automate the software and make the software usable as much as it's going to automate the physical system. Got to do that. Got to do it to the point where designers and contractors, this is the ideal way, the designers and contractors export a file. That file gets sent to the factory and immediately input into it. And with a whole series of production, the robots have a range of motion, meaning they can create all different shapes and sizes and angles and everything. This can be done. It's not necessarily easy, but I am firmly convinced that almost all houses will eventually be made using some form of this method. So that breaks it down in order that we can get back, because if you're able to do custom stuff like that, suddenly your detail comes back. My friend and good friend and former colleague Brian, who's off on his own now, Brian would be delighted at this prospect, I think. I think he's probably investigating this type of thing, is that you get to bring detail back with CNC. You get to bring detail back with ceramic 3D molding. And you can do a lot of things with that. So the other thing that we need to have as the barrier to entry to breaking out of these industrialist doldrums, which have kind of gripped the Western world ever since industrialism got heavily saturated after World War II. To break out of those industrial doldrums is the permit process. I'm going to be very specific about this, is that I was talking before about plan, execute. Okay. Well, this is done municipality by municipality, and that's a good thing. There may be state law involved somewhere. I know, for example, in California, everybody who designs and builds things in California knows that there's Title 24, there's seismic stuff. So, before you build anything, you got to get a permit that clears that stuff. The typical industrial way to do it is that you design everything, and then you go build it. Well, that makes it, you get to elevate things. Christopher Alexander was doing this. It's not like it's impossible to do it. He built many homes in this state, fantastic homes, and they were done because he was able to be vertically integrated by having design and building within the same company, and also teaching within the same company and software within the same company. This is part of our ambition here. And when you're able to do that, and you can work with the municipality to say, yes, first we're going to lay a foundation, and we know what the foundation is going to be, but we want to really get a feeling for wall height and ceiling height when we're there. You want to be on the thing before you decide it. And you adjust it up this much, down this much. Window position, window sill height, how that relates to the people when they're there, what feels comfortable, the way the light falls, especially the light throughout the seasons, the light throughout the day. And again, with the great experience with being in Italy. In Italy, they do this. And I saw there was a beautiful chapel up in the hills, still in Sorrento, but like halfway up to the good parrots, halfway up to the lemon orchards way up there, and they were going to repaint it. And what they didn't do some type of Pantone nonsense on the computer. Or maybe they did. Maybe they did use I'm not against using the technology. Maybe they used that stuff, but then you realize it never looks on paper like it does on the screen, and it never looks on screen or paper like it does when the paint hits the wall. Changing light conditions are a guarantee of that. So what they did is there were several colors that they were going to use, and they painted in a big like 2 foot by 4 foot patches, and they left it on the walls, and they left it there for a few months. And this is really getting into it. I don't know if I would necessarily have clients who would want to take months. You know, when you have a church that you're repainting, you have the luxury of time. I don't know too many clients who would want to take months to decide their house color, especially because you can change it. But they're getting excited to see the babies tonight in there in that nest or something. There they go. So you have the reason I imagine the reason they do that is that the light conditions, and especially in Sorrento, the color temperature of the light, it goes from in the winter, when the sun is very low in the sky, it's actually fairly north in latitude compared to the United States, Italy is. The shadows in the winter, shadows get very blue. Why? Because the light is very yellow. It's a little bit closer to a sunset all the time. And then the light gets more blue in the summer. And that has to do not only with the angle of the sun, but with the special reflection of the limestone of the mountains and the water. Very, very special place. And so they left that up so that you would see in the morning, in the evening, in the noontime, how the color looked, which one would truly feel and look the best, and then seeing the difference over months to months. And so that's one example of how this stuff is really done on a masterful level. But to be more humble about it and not so involved as an Italian Sorrentine church in Campania, you've got the like I said, look, the size of window trim, your custom carpentry, thinking about your cabinets. A lot of this stuff can be done in mock-up, but you are able to take it absolutely to another level when you do that kind of thing in construction. So those two areas of custom automated production, and secondly, of reforming the permit process is, I think, really, when you look at the triage of building, the two things that are most important. Underneath all of it is the idea that it kind of went without saying, but I should say it, the idea that you come at the design organically, that you work with a pattern language process with people, that you do not say, oh yes, I am the grand artist, I'm going to tell you what's good, but actually the way it comes out is I give you 3 fully rendered options and then you pick one. It's like you're not even getting to the good stuff when you do that, and you do so much more work and it takes so much more time. It's faster. Have pattern language sessions with people, sit down, get them to visualize stuff and say, what's important to you? What are your values? Pattern languages are about identifying values. What's important? How is your value for your home expressed in space? What's important to you? What is the largest thing? What is the smallest thing? What do you include? What do you not include? How do all these spaces fit together? And that you do early on. That's some of the most fun stuff. I love doing it. Clients love it. And, and the culture is changing. 10 years ago, people used to say it was impossible. 6 years ago, you'd get laughed at, by people. And it works. The technology is making it a lot easier than it was in the 70s. It was a lot harder to do this stuff in the 70s than it is now. Characteristically, Christopher Alexander influenced software, and then you can see his ideas influencing software coming up with agile methodology where you iterate and have feedback. It's like, okay, now that the software has been developed for architecture, that methodology that started in architecture to begin with gets to come back to the practice. And I've been very delighted to move that along. I hope that all you folks out there in YouTube land and build design land and cultural awareness land all have fun with this. So thank you very much for listening. Now, the time when I talk about other stuff. This is a Peterson, but it doesn't have a first name. It's a system pipe. So unlike the other pipes which have a filter, some of my pipes have a filter, some don't. This thing has this brilliant little device in it where the moisture, the tobacco tastes better when it's not too wet. So this takes moisture out of it into a little well. It was designed by a really brilliant Irish guy with a lot of pipe innovations. Great industrial design. There's a reason Corbusier, as much as I argue with Corbusier, there's a reason that he put a pipe on in his book as like the last image, because this is design simplified in a way. Think about the parameters, right? If it's thicker, it's heavier, but it doesn't get as hot if it's thicker. And how do you design those variables? You tilt this and it's different to hold. It's probably the smallest, most simple type of industrial design that's super impactful that people can understand, or at least used to back when even if you didn't smoke a pipe, you would at least understood because it was common enough how other people would. Well, yeah, I do this at the end now because if anybody finds it annoying, they just stop. Really beautiful sunset tonight. I kind of like this reflection. Knowles, I think, once said something about why he's not a pipe guy, but pipe guys and cigar guys understand each other, but pipes are, you gotta enjoy the fussiness. Cigars are simple. It's a little bit too humid, but anyways, I won't drag on. I'm done with anything I have to say. Got a call with a client in 10 minutes. We're finishing up a design. All right. Thank you very much, everyone.